Why hello fam. This is a video on doing a sleep assessment, basically understanding, okay, this is maybe why the things I've done to help myself sleep better aren't working the best, and here's what I can do next. So for myself, I used to sleep, I used to sleep like a baby. I used to sleep just so soundly all the time. In fact, I slept too much. Until 5 or 6 years ago when cumulative stress and body stuff started to catch up with me, and I went down to sleeping, I was lucky if I got 3-4 hours in a night. And today I'm back up to 7.5, 8. Not every single night perfectly, I'm going to be real. I still have some other factors that impact it. But I have literally doubled the amount of sleep that I get in a night. And I know that this is going to help you get some kind of result very quickly. All right. So most places when they talk about sleep, they talk about sleep in terms of kind of cool tips or blue light, these kind of jargony, gimmicky things. And while those things do kind of play a part in sleep and how we approach sleeping, fact of the matter is, when you are tired, you do not need another list of 20 different things that you can change and do. And when it is 3 or 4 in the morning and you are not sleeping, you don't need a list of 20 more things you can buy, because you'll buy them, if you're anything like me. Anyway, let's get back to what you can do in the here and now to improve your sleep. So we're going to be covering 4 different things. We're going to be covering 2 aspects of your sleep personality, because yes, you have a sleep personality. You have a sleep personality that is, for the most part, unique to you and going to remain consistent over the course of your life. And then there's also 2 modalities in terms of how you are approaching sleeping in the moment, the things that we can kind of shift and things that we have control over. Let's start with thing number 1. So thing number 1 is your sleep personality. And the first part of your sleep personality is your chronotype. So this is probably something that you've heard about before. It is very popular in the sleep world. If you've heard about the sleep doctor, Dr. Michael Bruce, that sort of a thing. But essentially your chronotype is when you specifically are programmed to naturally be sleepy, when you naturally will want to wake up and naturally want to feel tired. Now, the thing is that although this does shift over the course of our life gradually over time, if you're trying to live a life and a routine and a schedule that is totally contrary to your sleep personality, then honestly, there's only so much that you can do. Now, the good news is that most of us are what is called the bear archetype. The bear archetype is essentially the most sensitive to light. That means that, if it's bright in the morning, you will get up early in the morning. If it is bright late at night, you will probably have a hard time falling asleep and be more alert into the evening. Now, a lot of people who think of themselves as night owls actually are bears, night bears. I don't know, sleep bears? I don't know. Anyway, the point of the bear idea is that if you think that you might be a bear or that you might be a night owl, try playing around with try playing around with the light that you're exposing yourself to. Either if you need to sleep in a little bit later in the morning, then reduce the light that's hitting your face in the morning, or vice versa if you need to wake up earlier. That being said, not everybody is a bear. There are a certain amount of people who are like me, who are larks, who are wired to wake up sometimes before the sun rises and to pass out by like 8 to 10 p.m. Yeah, it can be a little bit annoying. For me, this manifested as no matter what, I was passing out super, super early in the evening, but I was waking up no matter what before the sun rose. And in the summertime, I live at a high latitude. That meant I was waking up at like 3:34 a.m. And eventually it got to the point where I couldn't fall asleep early anymore either. And I was just having my sleep sliced up at either end. Not the best. So larks are actually fairly rare in terms of the population. I know our whole society is like, yeah, be a morning person, get up early. But the fact is that larks, I don't remember the exact number, but I think they're somewhere between like 1 to 5% of the population. It's not a huge number. So if you have a hard time waking up super early in the morning, maybe go a little bit easier on yourself. You are not alone. The flip side of being a lark is being a night owl. Now, this is the one that I think most of us are the most familiar with. This is where you have trouble waking up in the morning, early in the morning, and you naturally get this like rush of energy at like 9 or 10 p.m. and you do some of your best work at night. if you are neurodivergent, in particular, if you have ADHD, there is a strong chance actually that you are a night owl. We have a higher rate of night owls relative to the rest of the population. My own larkness notwithstanding. That being said, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the video, if you do think that you're a night owl, it also could just be that you're a bear who's getting a lot of stimulation, or just someone sensitive to stimulation getting a lot of light, and it can be really valuable to play with that amount of light that you're getting. Okay, on to something a little bit less known, which is another aspect of your sleep personality, which is the natural amount of sleep that you need, and it's, like cousin, which is the phases, whether you're naturally monophasic or biphasic in your sleep. So what this means, I'll take us back a little bit, and I'll start with the number of hours that you need to sleep. You need 7 to 9 hours. I know that can be super depressing if you're not getting, and if it's really hard to even get 5 or 6 hours, believe me. But the important thing is not to convince yourself that you, of all the people in the world, are actually okay with just 5 or 6 hours of sleep, because the fact is that that's probably not true. There's a very, 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 very small percentage of the population that actually is wired to need less sleep. And it's a condition. It's a thing. Most of us just get habituated to less sleep, which is, the much more depressing version. So with that in mind, in that 7 to 9 hours, some of us actually need more like 7 hours most nights, and some of us actually need more like 9 hours most nights, and anywhere in between. All things aside, if I go to bed at the exact same time as my partner, and get a full night's sleep, which yes, does happen these days, I will naturally be up an hour or two ahead of him. Now, earlier on in my life, I found that 7.5 was just that magical number. When I slept in 7.5 hour stints, I always felt my most rested. And that's kind of what I would set my alarm for, was 7.5 hours from whenever I went to bed. These days, 7 is really where I'm at. And it may be that with continuing to recalibrate my sleep routines and my sleep senses, my physiology around sleep over time, because it is something that happens over time. It doesn't happen overnight for most of us. It's very possible that will shift. It is also true, though, that as we get older, we naturally need a little bit less sleep. But it's really a little bit, not a massive amount less sleep. Okay, the other part of this is phasic versus biphasic. Now, I could do a whole video on this, and I just might, but this isn't it. But the short version is that some of us naturally sleep in periods of like one big chunk, and some of us naturally wake up for a period in the middle of our sleep, and that can actually be normal. In areas of the world where, in the wintertime, there is more than a 9-hour period of darkness, before we had all these electronic lights and all these things to keep us kind of up and stimulated, people actually naturally tended towards biphasic. They naturally tended to sleep for a period of 4 or 5 hours and then wake up and then do shit. Like, not a whole bunch of shit, but sometimes like eat, go visit a friend, read a book, and then go to sleep for another, 3 to 4 hour period. So this might be you. For me, this was actually really helpful because ever since I was a kid, I've woken up in the middle of the night at least once to go to the bathroom. And I found that actually, if I just expect that, and I expect to be up for a half an hour in the middle of the night at like between 2 and 4 a.m., then I can have stuff ready for that. That's low stim. And I can do something peaceful like draw, or something that doesn't get my brain going, maybe listening to a chill audiobook or nature sounds, and I'll naturally get sleepy again and want to go back to bed. And sometimes, most of the time, I actually sleep more soundly if I allow myself to do this than if I try to just crush through the whole night. But I still get lost in my head sometimes and think that somehow that's sleeping like worse. And I do have to be careful, because if I do have a bigger wave of sleep, which actually doesn't happen surprisingly often even now, I might wake up, it's already light outside or something, or it's light in the space, and there's not a lot of chance of me going back to sleep at that point. Again, it does shift a little bit, but it tends to shift these things, when is the most appropriate time for you to fall asleep and wake up, how much you need to sleep, how much you need to kind of sleep in one go. These are all things that tend to be unique to the individual, and they do shift over time. They do shift in predictable ways as we get older. Like our chronotype tends to come a little earlier. Like we tend to advance more towards the early. Like I said, we need a little bit less sleep over time, but these changes are way less dramatic than you would think. More likely, if you're having a dramatic shift in the amount that you're able or seem to be needing sleep, it probably has more to do with something going on in you or in your life, or some extra stress or some cumulative stress. A lot of it has to do with stress. If you have kids, then you might be familiar with how babies go through sleep regressions. We as adults, I do not think we are immune to that. If we're having kind of a big processing, all these things can impact your sleep. But the reason I wanted to pause here is because as we go into the next two, routine and space, these are things that what works for you, it's going to really, really help if you know things like your chronotype and how many hours of sleep you need. Because if your routine is only allowing for a maximum window of 7 hours of sleep, and you know that you're someone who tends to need 8.5, then it's probably going to be a lot less successful, or it's going to be successful and you're still going to be tired all the time. So with that in mind, let's dig into routine, and keep in mind that it's going to be, specific to your needs and your unique context. So when it comes to routine, this gets a lot of attention in the media, and there's a million different ways that you can adjust your sleep routine. I think the simplest way to think about it for me is to think of it kind of in story format, where imagine that you are piloting this awesome human machine. And I use this analogy a lot. We're all squishy, sensitive us piloting these robotic meat suits. And if you are winding down your machine for the evening, it's not just going to be able to actually flick off immediately. Maybe actually a better analogy would be a train. If a train or even a car that's moving really fast needs to be stopped, you can't just expect it to stop in a moment. It needs to wind down. Those gears need to slow down. And if you try to stop it really, really fast, often it's not going to be super successful, right? Or there might be consequences or side effects. So we're the same way. When it comes to our sleep routine, the most important thing in terms of a sleep routine is creating a sleep routine that actually allows us to wind down for a few hours before bed. Typically, I think about this in terms of the environment, what's going on in your mind and what's entering your mind, new information, your emotions, what is going on emotionally, as well as your interaction with the world, your environment, your emotions, your mind, the interactions that you're having with people, and the stuff that's going on inside of you, like the stuff that's actually going on in your body. All of these are different forms of input that we need to wind down. So you need to make sure that you don't have a massive stomach full of food when you're going to bed, right? Your machine is going to need to keep chugging along in order to process that after you go to sleep. Or we all kind of know that going to bed super stressed and angry isn't super effective. So in terms of your routine, it's really important to create a routine that helps you actually do these kinds of relaxing things, and also keeps in mind that environmental things like lots of bright light or loud noises or new information, these are all things that keep your gears going as well. And these also need to be wound down. So yes, blue light is important, but also the amount of light that you're getting, the tone of the light relative to what's around you, right? Like if I look over and I see somebody who's like in darkness with like a blue window on their face from their phone, I know that they're probably getting that concentrated amount of stimulus right there. And even if it's got a red light filter on, that's a lot of light. That's a lot of input to process. And that brings us to the last thing, which is your space. So there's two elements of space here. There's the space that you use to actually wind down, and then there's the space that you actually sleep in. And you have to make sure that both of these spaces, maybe they're the same space. Maybe you're winding down in your actual bedroom or in your actual bed. For most of us, I think that's not usually the case. I think most of us are kind of on a couch or, outside or in our kitchen or something like that. And so some of the important things to consider here are, how does the space make you feel when you're not trying to sleep? So going into your bedroom and looking around and all those environmental things that I discussed, right, that help us wind down, does it bring you joy? Is it comfortable? Does it smell nice? Does it get dark? Does it get nice and cool so that your body temperature can come down? That's something that's important, is we actually need to bring our body temperature down to maximize our capacity to sleep. Our body needs to do it. And if it has to fight us to do it, again, hard to wind down those gears. Same thing goes for your wind down space, Are there a bunch of open loops and projects right in front of your eyes that you need to deal with? well, that's probably going to make it hard for you to do that wind down process. If there is a way that you can create basically a safe zone for yourself in your bedroom where you look around when you're alert, this is one of the secret weapons, is don't do this. If you're like me, you might go into your bedroom when you're trying to sleep and for like months, just before you go to bed, be like, write that thing in my space, in my routine, and then don't remember it by morning. Yeah. So we want to go in when we have the capacity, when we have the space, when we feel good, and use that as an opportunity to just feel it out. Look around. What comes up in our brains? What comes up in our hearts? What comes out in our bodies? Make sure that what you're creating is a space that is not just safe for you to start to kind of let go of all that stuff, but also is a space that just quite simply makes you feel good in your body, mind, and soul, in your heart. And, sometimes that's easier said than done, but knowing your sleep personality, knowing these first things, like how long you need to be there, like whether you're going to need to be up in the middle of the night very often, things like that, will help you get some clarity, get some direction on how to actually adjust your routine and your space. Okay, and I know that if you're applying these things, if you're taking a little bit of time to know yourself better and to think a little bit more critically about the space around you, you will be able to make an improvement in either your sleep quality or your sleep length of time or your sleep restfulness. It's not all going to happen at once, and it's not all going to happen overnight necessarily. For some people, it does, and it might. But I'm just speaking to those of you like me who it's been a battle for time, for a while. Know that it will get better. It can get better. And that the power is in your hands. All right, and I'm super excited. Let me know in the comments below what it is that you did in terms of change. Anything that this sparked for you. Anything that you took out of your space. Anything that you're like, oh, hey girl, I don't know about that. I want to know. Not only does it help me, it helps the other people around us to be able to make the best use, to apply this to their context, to be able to filter it through what works for them. And share this with somebody you know. If you know somebody who's struggling to sleep, please share this with them. Please. Every little bit helps, speaking as that person who is struggling to sleep. You don't want to be like, hey, I have the magical answer. You can say like, hey, this really helped me. All right. Until next time, fam, have a good one.